Hey, what's up everybody? I am going to start making cutting boards out of some scrap pieces of wood, well, cut off pieces of wood. Just previous projects. A lot of this wood I bought from a good friend of mine who's also a fellow woodworker, and he does a ton of stuff like this, so he has a lot of cut-offs a lot of time, and it allows me to get the wood and have my own little bit of fun. So I am taking a little bit of a break from carving pumpkins tonight. Most of what I'm going to do tonight is not going to be the entire cutting board. Cutting boards are time consuming, so try to batch them out. I have 4 of them set up here, and I'll just run through a couple of quick basics. When you're doing cutting board, you want to make sure that your end grains alternate and go against each other. You can kind of see that curves down, and this one kind of goes up. So you want to make sure that they alternate and they're not going in the same direction. If they go to the same direction, it'll cause your cutting board to cup or bowl. It's also a good idea to write the numbers, or some type of a sign on your pieces so that you can keep them in order. And if you separate them, and you can easily put them back together just by looking for your numbers. So the first thing I want to do is I've set up the first board that I want, which is this one right here. Right, so I have all this right here, and I kind of laid it out and decided how I want it to be. And I know that these pieces of Purple Heart are my shortest pieces. So I need to make everything else this length so that it all goes together correctly, and I don't waste a lot of glue on pieces that are extremely different in length. This one cuts off right here, so there's close to 12 inches that sticks up over that. And you can do that at a miter saw, you can do it at your table saw. I'm going to use my crosscut sled just because that's what I'm choosing to do. It's in front of the camera, and I trust my crosscut sled to make good cuts. So, pick this up. And if you have a crosscut sled, great for you, because you can do a lot of good cuts with one of these. And I am also going to set up my stop block so that I can make sure that when I'm making these cuts, everything is lined up to the same length. So the first thing I'll do is take this piece, set it down, and I'm going to raise my blade up. And get it to where it's just thick enough to go through the wood. And I'm going to set this up against the teeth. Tighten down my stop. Now I know every piece that I put in here is going to come out this size. So, the table saw is a little dusty, so I'm just going to throw on some ear and eye protection. And I'm going to start making some cuts. I will be raising and lowering the blade to get through the various pieces of wood just to get them cut down to size. This may or may not be a little quicker on the miter saw, but like I said, I'm staying in front of the camera on this. Put on a little hearing protection, and I can start with this piece. Okay, so we got all that done. I see I have one viewer in here. I appreciate you stopping by to visit. Take the crosscut sled down for a minute. Now we're going to need to set up the rear fence. All of these pieces are different thicknesses. You want them all to be the same. So we'll take this cutting board. And you're looking at it now. All these pieces are going to be relatively the same height, but they also need to be same thickness. So I have to find my shortest piece, thickness-wise, which I think is going to be this piece of maple right here. Looks to be pretty close to correct. So I need to set my fence based on that piece of maple. Turn the saw back up, get it to the height that I need it to be. Some of it is going to be not as high, some of it is going to be very high. But just a quick little tap like that and getting it close doesn't have to be extremely perfect. Your piece should slide in and out easily. Shouldn't be too much play. Looks like a little bit of play in there, but it might be because I'm off the tooth. And that appears to be okay. When you do this, you want to make sure that your piece of wood is touching the tooth, not just touching the blade. So you actually want to be touching on the edge of the tooth, not the actual inside of the blade. Otherwise, you're going to short yourself a little bit. I want to keep all this set up to be the right height. I feel like I'm missing a piece. I think I am, but I feel like I'm missing a piece of maple. Lose a piece? It's possible. But I know that I had this board set up to be just about 13 inches. Might be missing a piece. I think there should have been a piece in there. Either that or I had it like this. That's another reason why it's important to number it, because your numbers will tell you. I had it a little backwards. Your numbers will tell you what is right. So I would have lost my pattern if I didn't have it numbered, but I numbered it. So I was able to go back and quickly turn and look and make sure that I had it right. Like I said, I wanted that piece to be, this is my thinnest piece this way. So that's the thinnest I need all this. So when I surface all that, it all comes out pretty close to the same. And like I said in the beginning of the video, you want to make sure that your grains are crossing each other. So I want to make sure that I have the right top and bottom grains. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. I'm going to set those up and make sure, and then pay close attention as I'm ripping them to rip off of what I want the top to be, not off of the sides. And you want your grains to run an arch this way or an arch this way and every other. So it should kind of wave, and that'll prevent your cutting board from cupping. So taking a look here, seeing what way is going to work the best. That is the top. These thinner pieces, they don't add a whole lot of strength. You still kind of want to pay attention to those grain patterns and just making sure that they're not going the wrong direction on you. Most of this is all good. Definitely want that on the bottom. That's correct. cut off of this side, rip that side. That's going to be one of the first ones that I rip. And it's kind of hard to see the grain on that. It's going to be steely. Alright, so I'm going to make this one's going to be the first one that I rip, because I need to get rid of the pith, or the core, if you will. I need to get rid of that. That's not going to be well in the, it's not going to do very well in the cutting board. It doesn't do well in a lot of projects. I'm going to use my micro jig to hold it down and run it through. Safety glasses back on. And like I said, the saw will raise and lower quite a bit just to get to the right height. I want my saw blade just barely sticking out enough to where the teeth can kind of throw some of the chips out. So the checking. This board actually had a little bit of wobble to it. That doesn't matter for us right now. I've got a nice thin piece, and I can look at the grain. Take that off. Now I got a nice clean piece. I can take a look at the way the grain goes and match it up to my end pieces that I want, and make sure that they're opposite of each other. Off. Oh, there's a number. Call at the top. Alright, so I got that one kind of in order. Now, I want to make sure that I cut off the right side. So I'm just going to pencil mark everything that I want to make sure that I get rid of. I can do this on the bottom too, and then I know that that's my bottoms. But this will make it a lot quicker to make sure that I have everything lined up right as I am taking everything down. So this was the piece I measured for the height, and that's pretty dang good right now. So there's not a whole lot of gap on that. So I have number 2 is ready to go. I don't have to worry about cutting this one now. I am going to cut this one. So put the mask back on. And what I want to do is I want to cut away everything that has the pencil marks on it. If it has a pencil mark on it, I want to cut it off.
Do not need phone calls. If I put piece like this, I'm going to raise my blade to about the halfway mark. I'll run it through, flip it over, and run it. Alright, so that's all pretty close.
That is all pretty close. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to surface that at some point. And the thing I like about using cutoff pieces is you're really not wasting much of any of the wood. You're getting full use out of it. And you pay for the whole board, so you try to get full usage out of it if you can. So this one is set up. Now I can go ahead and I can pencil mark my tops and my bottoms and know that those are the ones that I want to keep. So color at the top. This is the bottom. And both of these are eventually going to get, both of these will eventually get surfaced. So it's not going to matter which is the top and the bottom, except for this little piece is going to end up getting cut out. This is going to be a lot less thick than what it is right now. Currently it's almost 1.5 inches thick, but it'll get down to about 1.25 inches thick. So again, I'm just making pencil marks on this so that I know what my top and bottoms are. The line should line up is the idea on that. If I was to flip this over, my pencil marks aren't going to line up. If I flip it back over, they line up. That's the idea. Helps you keep track of it. So the next step in this cutting board would be to go through and joint all these surfaces. These two, this one's pretty smooth and you could probably glue that together. But this one is very rough, so if you tried to smash that together with glue, you're not going to get a good joint, you're not going to get a good seam. All you're going to get is a bunch of stuff that's going to fall in there, and you don't want that, because that's going to just add to bacteria and other things of that nature, what you want to avoid. It should look a lot more like this. These two sides are both pretty smooth. They could use a little bit more smoothing, but that's a much tighter seam, and that's really what you want. But this is definitely still going to get addressed. I'm still going to joint this and make that a smoother fit, so that when I glue it together, it's very tight and you can't even get your fingernail in between there. Right now I can get my fingernail in between there. And we got 2 viewers, so I appreciate you guys swinging by. But since right now I'm set up to get my boards all dimensioned down to the same size, I'm going to take these other 3 boards and just kind of repeat this process that we just saw. For those of you joining in, really the first thing here is we've got this board set up and picked out and laid out. We have different types of wood in this board. I'll stand it up so you can kind of see the pattern. So in this board, we have cherry, sapele, purple heart, ignore that call, and more cherry, more maple, more sapele, more purple heart, more sapele, and on the ends cherry. So that is the outline for that board, and this board is ready for me to set aside. And when it comes time to start doing the jointing, I will joint everything at once. We'll get this one set aside and give you a little preview, a little better preview of what that'll look like. And we got 3 viewers now. Welcome, 3rd viewer. Appreciate you guys all stopping in, coming to see me and hang out. So just like I did on that first board, we're going to bring up the crosscut sled, and we'll start with this one because there's not a lot of cuts to make in this one. There's fewer boards, and in this board we've got huge mistake. That's what we got. Oh boy! But like I said, number your boards so when you drop something, you know which spot you're supposed to be in. So I numbered the boards. I got number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. This one was number 5. And since I kind of know the pattern, I pretty much know that this is going to be number 6 if my colorblind leaves me alone. There we go. 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I got 9 pieces here. Try this again without dropping it. So that's going to kind of be your look right there. We'll get it dimensioned down and get them all cut down to length first, and then we'll get them cut down to thickness. And again, we're looking for which one is the shortest, and I think that's going to be this one right here. So we will raise the blade up, and this is where if you have a miter saw, it might work out better for you, solely because you may be too far past the end of your crosscut sled. Make that just barely touch the blade. Run my stop over. Tighten that down. This should be able to move pretty freely. And we are going to trim off the end, so it doesn't matter if it's just enough to nick this. So I will show you on this. It is going to be just enough to nick that. I want my blade to be just a bit above it. So we can put all the way through it. Glasses on, dust mask on.
Okay.
So just because we don't want to continue to take this off and on, off and on, off and on, off and on, I'll move on to the next two boards. Get those ones the same thing, dimension them down, get them all so they're all the same length. It's really your first step is kind of getting them very close to the same length. They don't have to be perfect. You are going to trim them at the end and square them up, and you're going to cut out any tear off and what have you. So that's what you want to do. Looks like we got a few comments in here. Let me check and read some of these comments. Hey Tiff. Yes, Tim the Tool Man. Thank you. Let me check some of these comments here. Thank you, Hammer. I appreciate that. You can build that jig actually pretty easy if you're still watching. It's really just plywood, and there is a ton of videos on crosscut sleds, and you just router in your channel here so that you can slide your stop. On the bottom, just use some hardwood runners that fit perfectly in here, and that prevents you from sliding left to right, side to side. The least play that you have this way, the better. And you use just use paste wax. Keep this moving nice and free and smooth. That's all you gotta do. Thanks, Hammer. Appreciate it. All right, so like I said, I'm gonna get back to taking all these next ones, and I'm gonna dimension those down again real quick. I got 2 more boards to do, and this is why you batch them up, because it takes a lot of time to continue to just set this stuff up for one cutting board, and it takes a lot of time to do just one cutting board. But if you do it in batches, you guys just watch me do the second board. I already had one done before that, so we'll move on, get this going, and I'll rip through these 2 without saying much, and you'll see you can really dimension them down quickly.
Okay, again, you pick your shortest board.
Pick your shortest board. Move your jig, just barely touching the blade. Slide your stop into position. Lock that back down. The saw blade probably will barely take anything, if anything at all, off of that one. Alright, so just real quick, so I can explain to you guys why you see me flipping over these pieces of wood. This little nick right here, which you can't really see, that will probably get planed out. But I have to decide if I want to take that opportunity to have to plane that out. What if it's, what if this ends up being not that thick? Because it's not that big of a chip. It's only about 1/8 of an inch maybe. But do I want to take that chance? So, what I want to do is decide. This side's 4 corners are better. I can always write that number back on there.
Well,
I don't know if you guys picked this up on the camera or not. This is curly maple. I will try to get this to where you guys can see it. Curly maple is a very kind of cool wood. It's a hardwood. You can kind of see these little ridges. It's not from the saw blade. These ridges that are running up and down this way, that's just the natural grain of the wood, and it kind of shines by itself. So once you put a little bit of anything on it, like put some mineral spirits on it, it'll really make it pop. Mineral spirits are also great to use for cleaning up your sawdust and getting all that stuff out of the way. It helps remove the sawdust. But this curly maple, when you put a little bit of what would look to be a sealer on there, now you can kind of really see how that grain sticks out and it pops. All those little vertical spots. So I would love to have that running the full length of the cutting board, but it's just too thin, so it has to run vertically. And you will still get some kind of cool look in that part, just not as cool as the big face grain part. So I'll put the mineral spirits back. Just wanted to show you guys that. Let me check out a couple of these people commenting here, read a couple of them real quick. Hey Rob, Liz, how are ya? 6 days a week, that's a lot of work, Liz. Hi Chris. Appreciate you guys all stopping in. Alright, let's get back to this cutting work here.
this is a nice piece of black walnut. Very nice to work with cutting boards and lots of things.
Hey guys, I wanted to show you guys one other really cool thing. One of the woods that I really like working with. It is an exotic wood. I'll go back to the mineral spirits here. It is an exotic wood, and it's really, really fun to work with because the grain is just naturally, absolutely insanely crazy. So some of my carving friends in here that are stopping in, Rob and Liz and a few of the others, Chris, sapele. It is a form of mahogany and an unfinished piece of sapele. Get the light to hit that right. An unfinished piece. You get that guy a little wet though. You get some really, really nice looking grain out of it. Again, I would love to have that running the length of the cutting board. Too thin. It's got to go this way. But even that way, you still get some pretty nice looking grain even on the edge. I just had to show you that because sapele is one of my favorite woods as far as grain and color. It gets really, really crazy really, really fast. And it just is really cool to look at. And let's be honest, if we're woodworking, we want something that's cool to look at. Okay, back to the cuts. Shortest piece. We'll do this one. Touched. so we're done with the crosscut sled. Set that aside. So I said I bought all this wood, or a lot of this wood from a good buddy of mine. He's here in Michigan. He's another woodworker, and he also has a laser. Obviously, this was some of his test pieces for Detroit Skyline. He does a lot of cutting boards and coasters and just really, really cool stuff. If you're around Michigan, you want to check him out. He is Dis Bros Design. So DISBROS, Disbro Design. Back out with the fence, and we can start ripping everything down to thickness after we check our grain. And make sure that the grain is running opposite directions. Remember, you want your grain to wave. Alright, so that's it. I got my grain direction set up for this board. And I'm just going to make pencil marks so that I know potentially which side to cut and trim down. And of course that will change. I'm going to find my thinnest piece. It's either going to be this purple heart or this maple. And it is maple for the win. So again, you can set it up really, really fast. And just set it up right up against there. You don't want to be crammed against it, just a nice gentle push. And your piece should go through fairly easy. Should not be a daunting task. Set your depth, just barely come out of the wood. And get yourself to start ripping. Alright, so guys, when you're doing these rips, keep the orientation of your wood right. I know that this one went like this, and I know that I wanted to cut this side, right? But this is a nice, smooth, clean side. On the back, a little crack there. So which side do we want to cut? Put this side, smooth, nice side against your fence. Cut that side. Get rid of as much of that crack as you can. pretty much down to thickness now. You don't got to worry about getting them perfect because you're going to run them through your planer and you're going to flatten it all out. So this didn't even get touched, this didn't even get touched, but this is all within maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so in thickness. And that's kind of what you're going to end up removing as you go. So it'll all smooth out. We're going to do both sides when we smooth it out. That should be a pretty decent sized cutting board. Now we move on to the next. Which one is the thinnest? Say it's this one. Crank this blade up. It's a little tighter than I want it. Too loose on this one. Again, when you're adjusting these, make sure that you're touching teeth on the saw, not the actual inside of the blade. You want to actually be touching the tooth. Alright, I think I can deal with that. Sounds like one of my children is having a lot of fun up there. We'll get that one dimension down first, and then we'll get to the rest of them. Now on this board we have a really nice looking piece of walnut in there, so the grain should be pretty good on that one. That should make a nice eye-catching centerpiece on the board.
Looks like I miscalculated. Did not have the thickest piece showing. My double gear is not functioning properly. And have to get in there and clean that up.
forgot on that second board, and draw yourself some lines. Square your board up as best you can to one side. Draw lines across the top of it. Squiggly lines. And that way you can match them up. If you drop them, you match it up, you know it's your top. You don't have to worry about messing it up. Same as I'm going to do with this one right here. I'm just going to rotate it. Put it right up against the fence so I can kind of have them all as close as possible to where I want them. Squiggly lines. You do a few, just in case on some of those thin pieces you missed it. Hopefully you didn't miss them all. Alright, pull this final one out. Figure out which is my shortest board. Maybe this maple. Maple shorter than that. It's almost the same size as that. Yeah, I might want this maple piece right here. I've had problems with this saw and this bevel gear before. Legitimately, the bevel gear breaks. Never buy another Craftsman table saw. After this one, I'm going to jump up to a much nicer saw, a much better fence system, make my life much, much easier. At least that's the plan. Luckily, I have a wonderful wife that doesn't really give me a whole lot of complaint about the tools that I buy and the things that I do with my money. I think it's mostly because I will make her cool stuff so she doesn't complain. Alright, let's get these ones we mentioned down.
Now I'm going to start with my thickest pieces of wood because of my very not great bevel gear inside of here. So I want to make all my thicker cuts first. Start with this. Work our way down.